And welcome to What America's Thinking, where we discuss key elections, demographic trends, and public opinion. I'm Julia Manchester.
And I'm Rafael Bernal. With days left to go before the midterm elections, we've got a lot to cover, so let's jump into today's Hotlines. Nearly 21 million ballots have already been cast in early voting, but with millions more left to vote, all eyes are on swing states. 538's forecast puts Republicans taking the House still, but the contest for Senate is still a toss-up.
That's right. In Georgia, the Senate race between incumbent Rafael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker is razor thin. According to a recent Emerson College and The Hill survey, Warnock is just 2 percentage points ahead of Walker, garnering 49% of support versus 47% going for his GOP opponent.
Yet another closely watched race for Senate is Pennsylvania. So here to talk about this cycle's latest Emerson College and The Hill surveys is our friend, the director of Emerson College poll, Spencer Kimball. Welcome back, Spencer.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, Spencer, I've been covering Pennsylvania quite a bit, so I just wanted to start with that poll. You know, there's been a number of polls released post-debate that still have Fetterman, leading Oz very narrowly. However, Emerson, which obviously has been very accurate in the past, has Oz for the first time in, I believe, this cycle for Emerson, leading Fetterman. Do you think this is due to Fetterman's performance during the first debate?
Well, certainly if these numbers hold, I would chalk it up to his debate performance, because we asked a question in the poll about the debate, and there we found that 50% of voters were less impressed with John Fetterman after watching that debate.
So this race, it started as a tough one for Democrats. It kind of reflected a little bit of what we saw nationally. It became better for Democrats over the summer, even with Fetterman's stroke. And then we have sort of this debate, October surprise. Is Pennsylvania basically tracking the way the election's going on nationally?
Well, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of ebb and flows in this race. John Fetterman, who was pre-stroke, 4 days before the primary, and then had a lot of momentum. He wins that primary by 30 points. And if we take a look on the Republican side, Oz was the Trump endorsement, but barely wins that primary by about 950 votes. So it was a very contentious primary that they both come out of. And I think Fetterman started with a much larger advantage and then has seen that number kind of dissipate over the last 4 or 5 months to where we have it virtually as a toss-up.
So, Spencer, looking at the travel schedules of Fetterman and Oz, it's been fascinating because Fetterman's been very much paying more attention, I would say, than Democrats normally do to a lot of these rural parts of Pennsylvania. However, in the closing weekend ahead of Election Day, Fetterman's doing a rally with Obama in Pittsburgh, and then Biden's going to join them in Philadelphia. Donald Trump is going to Latrobe outside of Pittsburgh for Mastriano and Oz. Where do you think this election is going to be decided?
Well, yeah, so the Republicans are very strong in those rural areas, and the appeal of John Fetterman early on was he would be able to compete with that vote. Now, the base of the Democratic Party is in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and so that's where the Democrats are coming back to make sure that that vote comes out. And we'll see if Fetterman's able to gin up that type of excitement, particularly in Philadelphia. Remember, he's more of a Pittsburgh guy, and we'll see if that Philly vote comes out in very large numbers to put him over the top.
So we talked about that 21 million people nationally have already voted. Apparently, we're looking at an election with participation numbers around 2018 levels, maybe higher. Is this still a good thing for Democrats, as the common wisdom usually goes?
Right. So that conventional wisdom that the more people that vote, the stronger the Democrats will be. And remember, we had almost 160 million people vote in that presidential election last cycle, which was record-breaking of all sorts. We'll see if it regresses, comes back to the mean during this midterm election. Voting access issues have become back to the forefront, and we'll see who's actually comes out to vote. But that 21 million is a strong number, and hopefully we'll see more people come out in this election.
Another race I've been watching that isn't a Senate race is the gubernatorial race in Kansas in particular. And I know it hasn't garnered as much attention as, say, the governor's race in Arizona, but Emerson College in the Hill recently had a poll come out that showed Governor Laura Kelly, arguably one of the most vulnerable incumbent Democratic governors, leading the state's attorney general in that race on the Republican side. Do you think Laura Kelly can ultimately pull this off?
Yeah, so we've had a chance to pull this race a couple of times, and both times it fell on Laura Kelly's side of the equation. I think 2 and 3 points. And even the undecided vote seems to be breaking for her. The big concern for Laura Kelly is she's been able to take about 18% of that Republican vote. And we'll see if she's able to hold that number or if it melts away in these waning days and gives Schmidt an opportunity for an upset. But certainly early on, a Democrat winning, she's already won in Kansas, beating Sam Brown back 4 years ago by about 5 points. And so we'll see if she's able to continue that trend. Though obviously what many are considering to be a Republican wave year, it might be a beacon of light for the Democratic Party to take a look at her policies.
So we're approaching that point in the race where a lot of pundits come out and say, like, everybody's thinking so-and-so is going to win, but they're wrong because they make something up there. We heard, for instance, Michael Moore, who has been right when everybody else was wrong in previous elections, like 2016, saying that he thinks a lot of Democrats are going to come out and vote. That said, I mean, that might be wishful thinking on his part. We know he's not exactly a Republican. But that said, where are our blind spots in predicting this election? We know where the blind spots were in 2016, 2020 hindsight. We're kind of getting there with 2018. Where do you think they might be this year?
Well, a couple of states we're looking at, maybe New Hampshire was going to be in play as a surprise state, but I think the Democrats have been able to get Maggie Hassan in a good place. I'm looking really out west to Nevada and Arizona as states that are going to have major implications, not just for this cycle, but for 2024, really looking at that Hispanic vote and seeing if it stays with the Democratic Party or if it shifts. There will be a state like Oklahoma where we could see an upset in a governor's race. Kevin Stitt is not as popular there, though Oklahoma is a very strong Republican state. So that would be an interesting upset to see. But otherwise, the expectation is that Ron DeSantis is going to win by double digits and potentially run for president on that platform. And we're obviously going to keep an eye on the Trump-endorsed candidates because there's some inside politics going on or inside baseball within the Republican Party on if the Trump nominees are able to win or if they're not and where the future of the Republican Party goes from here.
Yeah, and looking at these turnout numbers, Spencer, I mean, over 21 million people have cast their ballots so far in early voting, and those numbers were reported 2 days ago, so it's likely higher than that. And I know that conventional wisdom would normally tell us that early voting favors Democrats over Republicans. But it seems like in recent elections, Republicans have really tried to tap into that early voting message while at the same time telling their candidates to come out and vote in person. I mean, I remember in Virginia last year, Governor Glenn Youngkin very much was driving that turnout, and Republicans turned out in huge numbers in the state. So is there any way to read the tea leaves from these very large early voting numbers we've seen so far?
It's difficult because it's on a state-by-state basis. In some of these states like Georgia, Florida, Arizona, they release different bits of information like age or race of these early voters. Some release nothing at all. And so you really have to kind of assume that based on previous election experience, that's how these people are going to vote. So I'm always a little weary of taking a look at these early returns, because it can lead you in maybe a different direction, thinking that, it looks like the Republican turnout in Arizona is stronger or the Democrat is stronger, only to see it balance off on Election Day.
And you mentioned earlier the Pennsylvania primary. We saw a lot of Republican primaries, especially, where Trump-endorsed candidates did really well. They made it to the general. And there's been two schools of thought. Maybe that's going to hurt Republicans because it's going to scare off voters in the middle, or maybe it's going to help Republicans because they're more, energetic candidates that are going to bring out the base. Do we have a way to measure, at this point anyway, do we have a way to measure if those candidates have helped or hurt Republicans?
Well, we're going to find out on Tuesday, particularly with Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker. I think those are going to be Trump's two main candidates. Obviously, he's got J.D. Vance in Ohio. He's got other candidates around the country that he's endorsed in the primaries. Masters out in Arizona, Laxalt in Nevada. But he's also got Zeldin in New York. But as far as those primaries go, yeah, his name is sort of on, at least a private ballot within the party, because I think if Oz and Walker were to lose, then there's going to be a lot of questions about what he did in his nominating process. If they were to win, he'll make the claim that those are his victories as well. So there's that inside baseball that I think we get to look at on Tuesday night as well.
All right, Spencer. Well, before you leave us, and this is kind of sad, but this is the last time we're going to talk to you before the votes are cast next week. So is it going to be the red wave or an even tsunami? What's going to happen?
Well, at least I'm brilliant today. We'll find out about Tuesday when reality steps in. But it looks like the House is going to go to the Republicans. I think the governorships are going to have some pickups for the Democrats. And then it's going to come down to these Senate races. And it's really just too close to call.
Excellent. Well, Spencer, thank you for being us today and throughout this whole campaign.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be right back. Hear what voters on the ground in Pennsylvania had to say about the midterms. Stay tuned.